Welcome to Danceplaying, everyone. I'm Edward, and as always, with me is the brilliant Lily.
Thanks for having me back.
Today, we're going to be diving deep into something that's always in the news cycle,
Yeah.
but it can get kind of oversimplified, right?
Absolutely.
Left-wing and right-wing politics.
It's easy to get lost in the back and forth
Yeah, and
without really understanding what's going on.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at some recent research that we've done
Mm-hmm.
to try to understand the core values and beliefs
Even core tenets.
that really shape these ideologies,
Yeah.
and then how those ideas turn into actual policies in the real world,
That's right.
especially focusing on North America.
Yeah. I'm excited to dig into that.
Me too. Okay, so fun fact that really blew my mind.
Okay.
The terms left and right when it comes to politics,
Mhm.
they come from where people sat during the French Revolution.
I know. It's such a cool little historical tidbit.
I had no idea.
Back in 1789, in the French National Assembly,
Oh, wow.
supporters of the king, they all sat on the right side of the president of the assembly.
Oh.
And the revolutionaries, they were on the left.
So just based on where somebody decided to park it,
Right.
you could kind of get a sense of where they were politically.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But of course, now it's way more complicated
Of course it is. Yeah.
than just two sides of a room.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that our research pointed out is that
Yeah.
it's really more like a spectrum than these two boxes, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest misconceptions, I think,
Yeah.
that people fall neatly into one or the other.
Yeah,
In reality, people hold really diverse views.
right.
They don't necessarily perfectly align with one side or the other.
Yeah. So how do we even start to unpack this?
Well, let's start with economics.
I think,
I think it's one of the most fundamental distinctions between left and right.
okay.
The left generally favors government intervention in the economy,
Mm-hmm.
often advocating for things like progressive taxation.
So the wealthier people and corporations would pay a higher percentage so that money can fund those social programs.
Yes. So we're talking about things like universal health care, affordable education.
Got it.
The left tends to view government as a way to address those inequalities and try to make things fairer for everybody.
Level the playing field a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the right generally prefers a more hands-off approach.
Right. Yeah, they emphasize individual liberty, free markets.
Okay.
You'll often hear the term trickle-down economics.
Right.
The idea being if businesses thrive, then that prosperity will eventually reach everyone.
Okay, interesting. So our research really dives into how these different economic approaches
Yeah.
actually play out in Canada and the U.S.
Yes.
It's super interesting to see how those philosophies become actual policies.
Exactly.
So one of the really stark contrasts
Yeah,
is the healthcare system.
absolutely.
In Canada, universal healthcare is a core value.
Mm-hmm.
It's embraced by pretty much everyone across the political spectrum.
It really is.
It seems like that stems from a very left-leaning perspective on social issues. Canadians see healthcare as a right,
Mm-hmm.
not a privilege tied to how much money you make.
That's right.
Now, in the U.S., healthcare is such a politically charged issue.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so different.
It's a major dividing line for sure.
So the right in the U.S. generally wants a more market-driven approach.
Yes,
Less government, more individual choice.
exactly.
They like things like health savings accounts.
Right.
More competition between insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the left tends to lean more towards
Yeah.
something more like Canada's system,
Right. A more universal government-funded model.
where everybody can get health care no matter how much they make.
Exactly. And I think this debate highlights that fundamental difference
Okay.
between how the left and right view the role of government.
Yeah.
The left sees it as essential for protecting people,
Okay.
providing a safety net.
Ensuring social welfare, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the right is more about individual responsibility
Mhm.
and limited government.
Yeah. Less intervention.
Less interference.
Yes.
Exactly.
Wow. So it's not just about policies.
No.
It's how we even talk about the issues.
It really shapes the entire conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like looking at the world through two different lenses.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So we've touched on economics, the role of government.
Mm.
What are some of the other big differences between left and right?
Well, social issues are another area where they often diverge.
Okay.
The left tends to be more in favor of progressive social policies.
Okay.
They advocate for things like LGBTQ plus rights, racial justice, environmental protection.
Okay.
They see those social justice issues as really interconnected
Oh.
and systemic.
Got it.
Yeah.
And our research actually had a great example with education,
Oh, yeah.
where the left will usually support things like universal early childhood education,
Yes.
increased funding for public schools, whereas the right is more in favor of school choice programs.
Right, allowing parents to use public funds for private schools.
Yeah, very different approaches. Yeah.
And on immigration, we saw the left is generally more open
Yeah.
to welcoming immigrants.
They see it as enriching society.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the right focuses more on things like national security and border control
Yeah.
and might want stricter policies.
Right. And often emphasizing assimilation into the existing culture.
Okay, so even with these big categories of left and right,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much variation.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of nuance.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as it might seem at first glance.
So in the next part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we're going to get into some of those distinctions within each side.
Yes, I think that'll be really illuminating.
Because it's not just these two big blocks, right?
Definitely not.
There are all these different schools of thought within left and right.
That's right. It's a much richer landscape than people often realize.
Yeah. And it's important to understand all that
Absolutely.
if we want to have these really productive conversations about politics.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We're going to delve deeper into all that in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
Me too.
I think people will be surprised by some of the nuances.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
It's going to be fascinating.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the core differences
Yeah.
between left and right.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned that
Yeah.
within each ideology,
Yeah.
there's actually a whole spectrum of views.
Absolutely. It's not just these two monolithic blocks.
Right, it's way more nuanced.
Yeah, understanding those distinctions can really help us have better conversations about politics.
For sure. Okay, so let's break that down a bit.
I-
We start with the variations within the right.
Sure. One important distinction is between
Okay.
social conservatism and economic liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
They both fall under that right-wing umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
but they kind of have different priorities.
Right, so social conservatives, they really emphasize traditional values.
Yeah, traditional values and social norms,
Yeah.
often rooted in religious beliefs.
Okay.
So they tend to focus on things like family structure,
Mm-hmm.
sexual morality, religious freedom.
So they might be against things like abortion or
Right.
same-sex marriage.
Exactly. They often argue that those things undermine traditional values.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, economic liberals,
Yeah.
they might have conservative views on social issues,
Right.
but their main focus is economic freedom.
Yeah, they're all about free markets,
Okay.
limited government intervention in the economy.
So lower taxes, deregulation, that sort of thing.
Exactly. They argue that those things ultimately lead to economic growth that benefits everyone.
Okay, so there's this tension within the right
Yeah.
between social values and economic freedom.
Yeah. And it's important to note that those things aren't always mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Someone might be very socially conservative,
Yeah.
but also a big supporter of free market capitalism.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And what about this rise of right-wing populism we've been seeing?
Oh, yeah. That definitely adds another layer of complexity.
It feels like it's harder to categorize.
It is. It doesn't always fit neatly.
Yeah, right-wing populism often taps into anxieties about cultural change,
Mm-hmm.
globalization,
Okay.
economic inequality.
Right.
It often positions itself as the voice of the ordinary people
Yeah.
against some sort of elite.
The establishment.
Yeah, exactly.
So it often aligns with conservative values,
Mhm.
but it can also be very confrontational
Yes.
and challenge those existing institutions.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, and I think it shows how important context is
Oh, absolutely.
when we're talking about these ideologies.
Yeah.
Because what might be considered right-wing in one country
Right.
could be totally different somewhere else.
Exactly. Political ideologies are always shaped by the culture and history of a place.
Right. So what's considered extreme in one place
Yeah.
might be totally mainstream in another.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've looked at variations within the right.
Now, what about the left?
Okay, well, on the left, one of the key distinctions is between social democracy and socialism.
Okay.
They both want social justice and greater equality,
Okay.
but they have different approaches.
Okay, so break that down for me.
So social democracy wants to achieve those goals within a capitalist system.
Okay, so they're not trying to overthrow capitalism completely.
No, they believe in regulating it, making it fair.
Okay.
So they'll advocate for strong social safety nets,
Mhm.
universal health care,
Right.
robust public services.
And you'll often hear people point to the Nordic countries.
Yeah, like Sweden, Denmark, Norway.
as examples of successful social democracies.
Exactly. They've managed to create more equitable societies.
Right. So they're basically saying,
Right.
okay, we can make capitalism work for everyone.
Yeah, let's harness the power of the market,
Yeah.
but make sure everyone benefits.
And share the wealth more evenly.
Exactly.
Now, socialists,
Yeah.
they also want social justice, but they're more critical of capitalism itself.
Yeah, they argue that it inherently creates inequality and exploitation.
So they're looking for a more fundamental change.
Right. Some socialists advocate for democratic socialism,
Okay.
where they try to achieve their goals through democratic processes and reforms, but others believe in a more revolutionary approach.
Right. They think the whole system needs to be overturned.
Yeah, they believe that systemic change requires more radical action.
And even within socialism,
Yeah.
you've got all these different schools of thought, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a huge range of views within socialism, from those who want worker cooperatives and community ownership to those who want to abolish private property altogether.
Right. So it's a much broader spectrum than people realize.
Definitely. It's much more nuanced than just one simple label.
And what about communism?
Yes, communism.
People often get that mixed up with socialism.
Yeah. It's important to remember that they are distinct ideologies. Communism, in its purest form,
Yeah.
wants a classless, stateless society where everything is owned and controlled collectively.
Okay.
Now, it shares some goals with socialism,
Mm-hmm.
like achieving economic equality,
Right.
but the methods and the ultimate vision are different.
So it seems like a lot of this boils down to
Oh, yeah.
how much government involvement
Yeah.
should there be in
Yeah.
society and the economy.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
That's a central point of tension between left and right.
Yeah.
And as we've seen,
Yeah.
even within each side,
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole range of opinions on that.
On how involved the government should be.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Okay, so I'm thinking about how this all plays out
Yeah.
in Canada and the U.S.
Mhm.
We talked about healthcare.
Yeah.
Where else do you see these differences in action?
Well, education is a great example.
Okay.
In Canada, there's a big emphasis on publicly funded education,
Right.
which reflects that more left-leaning approach of valuing universal access
Mm-hmm.
and affordability,
Right.
whereas in the U.S., there's more acceptance of private schools
Yeah.
and school choice programs.
Which aligns with the right's emphasis on individual choice.
Exactly. And market-based solutions.
So even within North America,
Yeah.
where we have so much in common culturally,
Mm-hmm.
these ideologies play out in really different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these differences go beyond just specific policies.
Okay.
They also shape the whole political conversation.
Yeah.
How issues are framed
Yeah.
and debated.
Right. It's like there are these filters
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
through which we interpret information and form our opinions.
They provide frameworks for understanding the world,
Oh, yeah.
but it's so important to be aware of those filters
Well,
and challenge our own assumptions.
Okay, so we've gone through all this nuance
Yeah.
within both left and right,
Mm-hmm.
and it's clear it's not just two opposing sides.
Definitely not.
But I'm still wondering, how do we actually move beyond the labels
Right.
and have more productive conversations
Yes, that's the million-dollar question.
about the things that really matter?
Yeah, that's what we all want, right?
It's amazing how much we've uncovered
Right.
about left and right.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. But I'm wondering how we use all this
Yeah.
to have better conversations about politics,
That's the key question, isn't it?
especially now when it feels like everyone's just shouting at each other.
Yeah, it can feel really divisive.
It does. So where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first step is to remember that those labels,
Okay.
left and right,
Mm-hmm.
they're just starting points.
Okay.
They're not meant to box people in
Right. Yeah.
or shut down the conversation.
So it's more about understanding why someone believes what they believe,
Exactly. The values and principles that drive their beliefs.
not just slapping a label on them.
Right. Because if we come to these discussions with curiosity
Right.
instead of judgment, then we can actually understand each other.
Right. So instead of assuming we know everything about someone
Mm-hmm.
just because they call themselves conservative or liberal,
Exactly.
we can ask questions,
Yeah.
actually listen to their answers,
And try to see things from that point of view.
try to walk in their shoes a bit.
Yeah.
And remember,
Yeah.
even within those big categories,
Mhm.
there's so much diversity of thought.
Absolutely. Two people who both call themselves conservative
Yeah.
might disagree on a whole bunch of issues.
Right. Great.
It's about going deeper
Yeah.
beyond those labels.
And being open to learning something new
Exactly.
and maybe even changing our own minds.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Our research really emphasized that these ideologies are constantly evolving.
Oh, they definitely are.
They're shaped by so many things.
Social changes, economic shifts, technological advances.
It makes me think about how much the internet and social media have changed things.
Oh, absolutely. They've completely transformed the way we get information. Yeah. And how we talk about politics.
Yeah, it's a whole new landscape.
It's like a Wild West out there.
It really is, so we can't just cling to the same ideas forever.
Right. We have to be willing to adapt. Be open to new information.
And new perspectives.
Yeah.
That's what it means to be an informed citizen these days.
It sounds exhausting.
Well, it can be challenging,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, because it requires critical thinking, evaluating different sources of information, and being willing to have respectful debates.
Those are all good things.
Yeah.
But it's tough in this current political climate.
Oh, for sure.
It feels so polarized.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in that outrage cycle and lose sight of the fact that we're all in this together.
Right.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
we're all just trying to figure things out.
Trying to make the world a better place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For ourselves and for future generations.
And maybe if we understand each other's values a little bit better, we can start to bridge those divides.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because disagreement doesn't have to mean hostility.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
So for everyone listening out there,
Yeah.
remember all these complexities. Don't just take those labels at face value.
Dig deeper.
Ask questions
Listen to the answers.
and form your own informed opinions.
Exactly. Be critical thinkers.
Be engaged citizens.
Yeah.
Because having those conversations with curiosity and respect,
Yes.
that's how we build a better world.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into left and right.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been enlightening
It has been a great conversation.
and hopefully a little bit challenging.
Yeah, it's good to stretch our brains a bit.
It is. For our latest episodes, articles, and products designed to feed your curiosity.
Be sure to visit our website, www.dansplain.xyz. We got it all.
And expand your understanding of this amazing universe.
See you next time.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep Dan-splaining the world around you.